the National Federation of Non-Profit Organizations in South Africa. The Congress is aimed at representing the interests and aspirations of NPOs for the attainment of a conducive and supportive environment for them and achieve delivery of services to its beneficiaries and society. NANPOC is organizing the first NPO Day event on the 12th of December at the Duduza Library in Ekurhuleni, which will be held on an annual basis. Now, joining us to discuss this further about NANPOC is the president himself, that's Nkululeko Nxesi. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming.
Afternoon, sir.
All right, tell us about the necessity to form a federation of NPOs in the country. Why is it important?
You see, the NPO sector, it's a very important sector in our society. It plays a critical role in assisting government in providing services, like being involved in the development agenda. Because there are areas where government will not reach, there are people that government will not reach. Now it uses the NPO sector in order to deliver those services. Now there are a number of challenges that the sector is facing, starting from the regulatory framework to the issues of resources and other challenges. And now we saw it, that is important that we must then form a federation that will unite all these NPOs so that these NPOs can speak with one voice in terms of issues that are affecting them. But also just to have a federation that will be involved in setting the developmental agenda of this country, also to ensure that we participate and we make influences in the policy formulation of the country.
How different are NPOs from NGOs, or are you just using an acronym but meaning the same business?
Yeah, well, I think it's the terminology, because in this country, all NPOs are registered by the National Department of Social Development. There is a directorate called the NPO Directorate, and when you are registered, you are given a certificate under NPO. So NPOs is the same thing with NGOs or CPOs. So that's another reason that we formed this federation, so that we kill all these different concept and terminologies. We say we are an NGO, we are a CPO. But if for instance, we are not a government entity, we are not a private sector entity, and then we are working for development and we are not for profit, then we say you are a non-profit organization.
How effective are NPOs in the country?
Well, NPOs are very effective. Let's start before the 1994 democracy. NPOs were in the forefront when the political organizations, the liberation movements were banned. The NPO sector, the civic society, was the one that was in the forefront. Working with churches and then organizing. For families that were in distress, and then pressurizing the apartheid government also to advance. To do away with apartheid. Now come post 1994. And that's where we started to see the role of the NPO sector changing, because what then happened is that government, the government of 1994 took the cream of leadership and absorbed them into their system. That's when we begin to see the downfall of NPOs. But now we're in the process of resuscitating, because if you talk about HIV and AIDS, if you talk about TB, NPOs have been in the forefront in fighting those those social ills, because we've got 141,000 plus minus 141,000 registered NPOs in South Africa, and there's a lot that is not registered. So it tells you.
Yeah. There's so many of them, which makes funding very difficult for them. So how is the issue of funding addressed?
Yes. Again, we are going to use the pre-1994 and the post-1994. Pre-1994 NPOs, it was not that difficult to source funding, because we also had the international solidarity funding. But after 1994, the international donor community said, South Africa, we are free now. We've got a democratic dispensation. You can manage to fund your own. Now that's why almost every day NPOs are losing funding. So that's a problem. But then we are arguing as the NANPOC that the government, with the budget that it has, it can actually assist, because if there's a proper planning and a proper budgeting, you can be able to distribute the government resources to almost all NPOs. But also the private sector, we know that it is pumping resources to the NPO sector.
So at the moment, give us a sense of which organizations are affiliated to the mother body.
Yes, because we started this Congress, mid this year around June, July. So for now we've got about 150 NPOs. That will include your Men and Boy Foundation. That will include your angel sisters, and then most of these NPOs actually are CPOs, because what we want to do, we don't want to only focus on the national NPOs, the ones that they are well resourced. We want to also to focus on the grassroots organizations, and we are targeting all sectors within the NPO sector, like your traditional leaders sector, your traditional practitioner sectors, those that are in the health space, those that are in the environment space, and so on and so on.
So since your establishment, have you raised the concern about the organizations not getting funding? For a very long time, you'd find that they're not even able to file their financials so that they can report to their funders.
The reason that we are having this NPO day is the beginning of that process, because we have met, for instance, with government officials, raising these issues, and we are actually planning to have an engagement with the president of the country himself, because we believe that issues of the NPO sector cannot be discussed by a specific department, as much as Department of Social Development is a custodian of this sector, but we feel that we need to raise these issues with the government, that is the president, and then the provinces want to raise it with the premiers, in the municipalities want to raise it with the mayors, because these are the serious issues, and yet the NPO sector is playing a vital and a critical role in the development space.
There are some NGOs that have really tainted the image and reputation of what an NGO should stand for. You'll find that an NGO has received money to take care of orphans, but those orphans would be abused. And some would receive funding, the money would disappear, and the owners would not be, or rather the managers of that NPO would not be found anywhere. So what do you have to say about corruption within the NGOs?
Well, we can't deny that corruption, unfortunately, is almost in every sector in our society, be it government, be it corporate sector, be it NPO sector, be it churches, and so on. So all, those actions, we denounce them. Those actions, we object them, we reject to them, and that's why we are saying we need to have a federation like NANPOC that will firstly assist by raising awareness on the same issue, because if we want government to be accountable, if we want private sector to be accountable, we ourselves as the sector, we must be accountable. There has been a debate of what model must we take in terms of regulating the NPO sector. Must NPOs self-regulate, or must government regulate the NPO? So as NANPOC, we think that discussion must be taken forward, but we know that there are NPOs that are culprit to that. However, the majority of the NPO sector is not necessarily corrupt.
But some people are really frustrated by the NGOs, and they are so hurt because like when you look at the example of SD Many, other people are saying, why should we take NGOs seriously? Because if there is a collaboration between government and NGOs to the disgruntlement of the community and the demise of their family members, people dying, they're not being taken care of, that is very, very embarrassing.
I think the issue of the Sitimeng is a worst case scenario of then measuring the role and the importance and the efficacy and efficiency of the NPO sector. That was a tragedy. However, that issue, it was some government officials who were corrupt, who were then using NPO, because another phenomenon that we are beginning to see emerging is where some government officials, they are like throwing a javelin, where they will collude with some individual within certain NGOs to throw in money so that they take the money on the other side. That's why we are saying it's important that we must have a structure like a NANPOC so that we can begin to raise these issues, because you can't have one or two NPOs.
But are you aware that some people who run NGOs are afraid to speak, and therefore they would just toe the line? So when you come into office, you were concerned about these happenings. So how are you going to stand the ground, and how are you going to sing the same chorus as NPOs to say that no means no, and no to corruption, and all of us must toe the line?
I think the issue has to lie with the NPO Act, because one of our campaign now is to force government to amend the NPO Act, because the NPO Act that is there was enacted in 1997 and 1999. So it's an old act. It's irrelevant to these issues. Linked to that is the issue of resources, because if NPOs can be capacitated so that they can be able to be self-reliant in terms of resource mobilization, we'll be able to address what you are raising. Because if an NPO depends on a particular government department, and those officials, they come, they threaten that if you don't do 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to cut your funding. So as NANPOC, that's where we come in, whereby we're saying let's create a conducive environment whereby NPOs can not only depend on government, on government departments for resources, because it is this issue of dependency syndrome that is making some NPOs to be susceptible.
Okay, are you going to do peer review to see if there aren't those who are rotten apples within the organization?
We are saying we are going to be developing a code of conduct for the NPO sector, so that we can be accountable to ourselves, so that before government or anyone else can come and point fingers on us, we must have that peer review process.
All right, thank you very much for making time to speak to us.
My pleasure.
All right, I'm speaking here to the president of the National Non-Profit Organization Congress. That's Mr. Nkululeko Nxesi, talking about the NPO Day on the 12th of December right here in Johannesburg. We're going to take a break, or rather, let me say that, let me correct myself, not in Johannesburg, but rather in Duduza Library in Ekurhuleni. And we continue with our program now. A new exhibition highlighting the experiences of political prisoners at the Old Fort prison situated at Constitutional Hill has been unveiled